when light breaks through, transforming trauma into purpose. Have you ever felt like your life was shattered into a million pieces, so broken that you couldn't imagine how you'd ever feel whole again? I want to tell you about someone who knows that feeling intimately, someone whose story will forever change how you think about resilience and human capacity for renewal. I recently had the privilege of interviewing Faith Brown, founder of Impacting Faith and Resiliency. Her journey through unimaginable darkness has illuminated paths for countless others seeking healing. What struck me most about Faith wasn't just her survival story, though that alone would leave you breathless, but how she transformed her deepest wounds into a mission that's changing lives across communities. Faith Brown isn't just a survivor, she's a revolutionary force who has taken the darkest chapter of her life and transformed it into a beacon of hope for others walking through their own valleys of shadow. The truth about trauma is that it doesn't just happen and then end. It reverberates, it echoes, sometimes for years, sometimes for generations. It's like throwing a stone into still water. The impact creates ripples that extend far beyond the initial point of contact. But what if I told you that the very thing that breaks us can become the foundation upon which we build something extraordinary? What if our deepest wounds could become portals to our greatest purpose? What if, and stay with me here, the cracks in our hearts are actually where the light gets in? This isn't wishful thinking or inspirational poster material. This is the reality I witnessed through Faith Brown's work and the stories of countless survivors who refuse to be defined by what happened to them. Let me be clear about something. Healing from trauma isn't about getting over it or moving on, as our culture so casually suggests, as if trauma were simply a bad mood or a minor inconvenience. It's about integration. It's about making meaning. It's about reclaiming your narrative when someone or something tried to write your story for you. The first truth Faith Brown's work reveals is profoundly simple yet revolutionary. Healing is possible, and survivors are not defined by their trauma. Think about that for a moment. No matter how deep the pain, there is hope for healing. Your worth and your future are not determined by what you have endured. Resilience can rise from even the darkest moments. I remember sitting across from Faith, watching her eyes light up as she described watching survivors in her programs recognize their own strength for the first time. That moment, she told me, when someone realizes they are so much more than what happened to them, that's sacred ground. But here's what most trauma recovery programs miss: healing rarely happens in isolation. In fact, trying to heal alone is like trying to perform surgery on yourself. Technically possible, perhaps, but extraordinarily difficult and unnecessarily painful. This brings me to the second truth: community support fuels empowerment. In Chicago, a remarkable woman named Kamisha Jones recognized this when she founded Sister Afia Community Mental Wellness. After battling depression herself, Kamisha realized how few mental health resources existed specifically for Black women like her. The barriers were everywhere: stigma, cultural misunderstanding, prohibitive costs. It was as if the mental health system had been designed specifically to exclude those who needed it most. So, what did she do? She created what was missing. Today, Sister Afia offers sliding scale therapy with culturally responsive care led by Black women practitioners. They've built peer led support circles where survivors can share openly without judgment. Hundreds of women have accessed these services, reporting increased self esteem, reduced shame about seeking help, and stronger connections with others facing similar challenges. One participant told Kamesha, "Before finding this community, I thought I was broken beyond repair. Now I know I'm just healing and I'm not doing it alone." That's the power of community. When we heal together, we heal differently. We heal better. We heal faster. We heal more completely. But community support isn't just about feeling better, it's about rebuilding a sense of safety and belonging that trauma often destroys. It's about creating spaces where survivors can reclaim their voices and their power. I've seen this principle at work through organizations like the Joyful Heart Foundation, founded by Mariska Hargitay, after her role on Law and Order SVU brought her face to face with survivors' stories. What began as one woman listening deeply to trauma survivors has grown into a national movement breaking the silence around abuse. Their No More campaign has reached millions. Their advocacy has reformed rape kit processing laws across several states, a stunning example of how compassion can transform into concrete policy change. But perhaps most importantly, they've shifted the national conversation about abuse from secrecy and shame toward empowerment and solidarity. This brings me to the third and perhaps most transformative truth: faith and purpose can transform pain into power. After surviving a devastating domestic violence attack that resulted in the loss of her four children and nearly claiming her own life, Faith Brown found herself at a crossroads that few of us can imagine. The path forward wasn't clear. The pain was overwhelming. The darkness was thick enough to touch. But through her faith and with the support of her community, Faith found purpose in her pain. She found it impacting faith and resiliency, creating trauma informed resources and support groups specifically for marginalized survivors who often feel invisible in their suffering. Today, her work empowers hundreds annually through workshops, speaking engagements, and resource referrals. She's influencing policy discussions at local and state levels regarding survivor needs. Her single voice has catalyzed collective action against cycles of silence and shame within both church and community settings. As Faith told me, my children's lives mattered, my life matters, and I refuse to let trauma have the final word in my story. This is the alchemy that happens when we ground our healing in something larger than ourselves, whether that's faith, justice, or service to others. Our wounds become wisdom. Our tears water the seeds of transformation. Our stories become bridges for others still trapped in isolation. But let me be clear about something. Transforming trauma into purpose isn't about putting a positive spin on suffering. It's not about minimizing the reality of what happened or suggesting that trauma is somehow worth it because of what comes after. It's not spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity dressed up in recovery language. No, the loss is real, the pain is real, and nothing can erase that. What transformation offers is not erasure, but integration, not forgetting, but remembering differently, not diminishing our wounds, but allowing them to become portals through which we connect more deeply with ourselves and others. I think about the countless survivors who found their voices through Faith Brown's programs. Women who thought their stories were too painful to tell, too shameful to share. Men who believed vulnerability meant weakness. Young people who had never seen models of healing that looked like them. One by one, they're discovering that sharing their truth with authenticity and courage doesn't just heal them, it creates ripples that reach others who feel invisible in their pain. It ignites sparks that encourage action toward healing for all. This is how movements begin. This is how cultures change. This is how we break intergenerational cycles of trauma, one story, one voice, one act of courage at a time. So, where does this leave us? What can we do with these truths? If you're struggling right now, I want you to hear this. Reach out to yourself first with compassion rather than judgment. You deserve gentleness. You deserve care. You deserve healing. The very fact that you've survived until this moment means you have reserves of strength you may not even recognize yet. If you know someone who may be suffering silently, offer your presence, not to fix or solve, but to witness, to listen, to remind them they're not alone. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can say is simply, I see you, I believe you, I'm here. And for all of us, consider joining or supporting local organizations advocating for trauma recovery and violence prevention. Or if you're ready, share your own story because every act matters when building safer, more resilient communities together. I want to leave you with something Faith Brown said that continues to haunt me. Healing isn't just about getting better, it's about getting freer, and freedom is meant to be shared. Today, I challenge you to become part of this freedom movement, to recognize that behind every statistic is a human being with a story not so different from your own, to understand that we all carry wounds, visible and invisible, and that our collective healing depends on our willingness to see each other's pain without turning away. What if starting today we created a world where trauma survivors weren't just survivors but leaders, where their wisdom shaped our institutions, our communities, our responses to suffering? What if we recognize that those who have walked through fire have gifts to offer that the rest of us desperately need? The poet Andrea Gibson writes, the most tragic thing I've ever seen is a person who believes they are unworthy of love, who calls their own magnificence invisible. Your magnificence is not invisible. Your pain does not define you. Your story is still being written. And perhaps the chapter you're in right now, the one that feels impossible, is actually the turning point. The moment when you discover that you are stronger than you knew, braver than you believed, and never, ever alone. Stand with survivors. Learn from their resilience. Join their revolution of healing because when we transform trauma into purpose, we don't just change individual lives, we change the world. Thank you.